Welcome back to the channel. If you're a DC Comics fan, like myself, things are about to go from bad to absolutely worse. We've heard the rumors and knew for quite some time that there were going to be some massive layoffs at Warner Brothers Discovery since the merger. They already had one round, which basically focused on HBO Max, but now it's actually going to start hitting DC Comics, and I'm going to explain to you why you shouldn't get your hopes up, because this is absolutely bad news for the future of DC Comics, at least in the short term. Warner Brothers Discovery is preparing for another wave of layoffs according to Deadline. This time around, the layoffs are expected to primarily hit Warner Brothers Television Group, which serves as the production arm of the CW and DC Comics and the distribution arm of Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and HBO. Moreover, there is speculation the firings may begin sometime in the next week. I know many of you are saying to yourselves, DC Comics is in a terrible state right now. Can firings really be the worst thing that could possibly happen? While I can definitely sympathize with that point of view and understand where you're coming from, one of the big problems at DC Comics right now are the writers, and they're not DC Comics employees. They're actually contractors working for DC Comics. So the chances that these layoffs, at least in the short term, have any effect on the quality of DC Comics is virtually none at this point. The same bad writers are going to be working for DC Comics. They're starting to announce some of their Dawn of DCU initiatives, and we're seeing the same writers kind of pop up here and there. Yes, we've had a couple of victories. Superman Son of Kal-El is canceled. They are going to spin it off into a miniseries so they don't embarrass Tom Taylor too bad, but we are seeing the usual suspects. T.D. Howard's there. All of a sudden, Leah Williams is writing for DC Comics now. You know we're going to see V.I. Allett. We're going to see Tim Sheridan. We're going to see all the crappy writers at DC Comics. So at least short term, I don't expect anything positive as far as the quality of DC Comics to actually come out of this. And quite frankly, I expect this round of layoffs in particular to really start targeting executives and staff with much higher pay grades than the underperforming editorial staff at DC Comics. Obviously, this is all by design, and it should feel familiar at this point. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav has not yet implemented a new strategy for DC and DC-based content at the company. As long ago as April, shortly after the Warner Brothers Discovery merger closed, Zaslav was reported to be considering a reorganization that would make DC its own vertical content. DC Comics also lost a third of its editorial staff and many others, including sales and marketing staff, in multiple rounds of brutal cuts under then-owner AT&T in 2020. And that's where this all gets really scary. DC Comics already experienced 2 rounds of debilitating layoffs during the pandemic. DC Comics haven't recovered from losing comic industry vets like Dan Didio, Bob Harris, Bobby Chase, and others. There were also credible rumors at the time. A majority of DC Comics editors were actually interns and had virtually no experience editing comic books. And I imagine by this point, a lot of those interns were actually hired by DC Comics because they're exceptionally cheap, and it really shows in the product. This is the worst era in the history of DC Comics that we're experiencing right now because the story quality is so poor. And it all starts with management, obviously Jim Lee and Marie Javins, who are absolutely overwhelmed because of the loss of all those other executives that were cut 2 years ago, but also because the editorial staff itself has no one with any real strategic vision, no real experience writing successful comic books, really putting out a line that works, that's interconnected, and really builds to something. That's why we're just getting crap thrown at the wall over and over again, because this editorial staff is already as cheap as can be and bare bones as it is. They can't afford to lose anybody else. But we know at this very moment, if these layoffs haven't happened already, they're about to happen. And they're certainly going to hit the DC editorial staff. They're going to hit marketing. They're going to hit all those departments, because they're squeezing down budgets. They're looking to save money. And the chances that DC Comics' budget is actually going to get bigger so they can actually hire some competent editors who could actually go out and hire competent writers is virtually nil at this point. The situation that they're in right now just doesn't allow for a scenario for anything to get better as it currently stands. Obviously there is, and I'm crossing my fingers on this right now, the hope that potentially DC Comics properties, at least some of them, could be licensed out to other people that are actually comic book professionals that want to take these characters and do good stories. Unfortunately, none of those people work for DC Comics right now because they probably don't have enough money. Cutting down DC Comics' already minuscule budget is almost guaranteed. An insider explained layoffs in October were always expected, saying, quote, everyone was given financial targets going into Q4. Those targets include headcounts, and October was always the expectation for the axe to fall, unquote. In addition, it is currently thought the fall season will see the end of the cuts, as that has always been the goal, to conclude before the holiday season begins. Reports suggest downsizing can be attributed to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav's efforts to find $3 billion in savings after the merger, which left the company with a net loss of $3.4 billion. To be fair, DC Comics' operating budget is a drop in the bucket of that $3 billion that they're looking to save. But we know that Warner Brothers Discovery basically canceled their entire San Diego Comic-Con plans for 2022 just to save $25 million. DC's budget is certainly larger than that. Warner Brothers Discovery under David Zaslav are looking to cut money everywhere that they can. One of the logical ways to do this and generate further revenue for the company would actually be to just get rid of DC Comics as we know it. Not publish any new comic books, just license the stuff out, have a couple people oversee the license, bring in revenue, and not have to spend money on this stuff anymore. I really do believe at this point in time, everything is kind of pointing toward that end game. We know Warner Brothers Discovery have started licensing out DC properties in other medias. And I also received a scoop from an industry insider that Warner Brothers Discovery's accounting team were starting to look at DC Comics like last month, maybe 1 or 2 months ago, asking the hard questions. Why are you making comic books that aren't making money? Yes, Batman is making money and is keeping the company afloat, but a lot of stuff isn't making money right now, and they wanted to know who was going to make these decisions. If you didn't know about this and you haven't seen this, you need to check this video out. I made this video talking about the state of DC Comics and why they were under the microscope and why that was likely to lead to bad things in the future. If you can't see it here, there's also a link in the video description.